All right, so I'll try to be quick. Um, I started, actually, how many of you know what you want to do? Have a clue, like for a career?
Show of hands, anybody know? Okay, Soraya, what do you want?
I want to become a real estate.
Real estate, okay.
Good for you.
Karen,
Esthetician stuff or like the CNA stuff,
okay.
maybe.
Nice.
Maybe.
Anybody else?
Yeah, over here, these two.
Cheyenne? All right, nurse. Yari? Photography?
Okay. Well, good for you guys. I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. Started college at UTC and had a whole long list of things I did not want to do, but had no idea how I would make a living, never even really thought about it. But I do remember in my English class in high school telling my teacher that there was not one single thing she was teaching me that I would ever use in a career that I would ever have, because I hated English. I hated writing. I didn't like it. They used to teach us, it was just memory. You'd go to the library and you just basically get an encyclopedia and copy a bunch of stuff, and then that would be your paper. But in college, about 2 or 3 years in, I had to take some other English classes, and I took a fiction writing class, and I just fell in love with it. Found out I had what I thought was a sense of humor and could express it in writing. And this was early 80s, and the Arena had just opened at UTC. And
That's how old he is, folks.
that's how old I'm 60. I'll be 61 years old on Friday.
Yeah, we have the same.
Okay.
You were born a day before.
14th for me, so
Then
Saturday. Okay.
Yeah, we have the same
Saturday.
birthday.
Yep. And so the Arena had just opened, and we had a student newspaper, and a guy kept writing record reviews, and he reviewed a David Bowie record and didn't like it, and said the guy's career was over. And it made me so mad, I went down to the office there and said, "This guy's killing me. What do I have to do to write record reviews?" And they handed me two or three, and I said, I said, "Bring a review back." I said, "What do I have to do with the record?" And they said, "You get to keep them." All of a sudden, now I'm interested. A little while later, they announced that the features editor position of the paper was open. So I went in and said, "I'd like to apply," and they said, "You're the only one that's applied, you've got the job." And I found out that that came with stipend, which meant it paid for school. Then I found out you got 2 free tickets to every show that came to the Arena to do reviews, and I was absolutely hooked. So applied at the Times, Chattanooga Times, got the job, but then they gave it to somebody else, so I went to the Free Press, got that job, and literally told the guy who was doing the feature writing that I wanted his job when he left. And
So if you guys didn't know, Chattanooga used to have 2 newspapers.
correct.
So we had a morning paper, the Chattanooga Times, and the evening paper, the Chattanooga News Free Press.
Correct. And so Jim Ruth was the guy's name. He was super cool, super nice to me, and he let me do a lot of other reviews that if he didn't want to. So I just thought that was about the coolest thing in the world, the idea that I could go to concerts and get in for free. And so basically got hooked. Over the years, so that was 1987. So I did that job for almost 37 years. Met people like Alex because his former partner, a guy named Brad Steiner, on-air partner, and I ended up camping together at Bonnaroo for a couple of years. And then we discovered that we were having lunch together about once a week where we were talking about Bonnaroo. And just in 2018, we were at lunch, and I said, we should do a podcast, which was a new kind of thing about Bonnaroo, because we seem to be talking about it all the time. And his eyes lit up. He called a guy named Russ Jackson, created a website for us. We came up with a name, The What Podcast, which is a terrible, terrible name, but the stages at Bonnaroo are the what, the which, this, that, and the other. So it kind of made sense. We thought it would last about 3 months, and we've been doing it ever since.
So 6 years now.
Yeah. And again, it was all about the free tickets. We got in
So your whole into journalism was about getting
free tickets, free access.
free access. So guys,
Yeah.
that's one thing you can learn from today's lesson about journalism. One way to get in places free, the press pass, the power of the press pass.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, that's a big, big part of that is the truth. But what we learned, we called. So we actually reached out to the organizers of the festival, and because we wanted to be legit, and we called and said we want to do this, and they were all for it because obviously it was free publicity for them. And they just said, you can't use Bonnaroo in your name and you can't use any of our graphics, but otherwise we'll help you any way we can. And they have everything from helping set up interviews with artists to giving us access to golf cart rides, just all kinds of things. It's been really stunning. And then because it was successful and we were really surprised, we started hearing from people all around the country who had similar stories. In other words, they were hanging out with their friends once or twice a week or their colleagues at work and talking about this great music festival. And so we now do the thing every week. Brad is no longer doing it. He moved to New York where he is program director for some radio conglomerate, Odyssey. Yeah, doing really well. And just had too much time, so it's now Russ and a guy named Brian Stone who had also a long music career. I mean, not music, but radio career, does some podcasting. So that's sort of the quick. I now work for the Dalton Library or the Northwest Whitfield, Georgia Library System.
Yeah, I brought you a librarian today.
Yep. Completely different career move. I love it because it pays me a whole lot more money than journalism did, to be honest. The benefits are a lot better. Part of my job is facilities manager. We're building a brand new pavilion, like a $4.5 million pavilion. That sort of is under my bailiwick to get it done. So completely different career change. But because of the podcast, I still do a weekly radio show on Saturday mornings called On the Move Radio. That's all about Chattanooga news and events. Yeah, I get to do stuff like this, quite honestly. I was on with Jed Mescon, his daily show at GOW last Friday to talk about fall festivals. So I still have a little bit of my foot in journalism, if you will. I used to do a weekly thing on Channel 3, sort of what's going on the calendar type of thing. So I mention that only because I've done newspaper, radio, television, and podcasting. So I have a little bit of experience in all of those things.
Yeah, so I gave you guys some printed out examples of Barry's work. I can click on these links if you'd like to discuss them more.
Yeah.
But, we've heard what Barry's up to now. Well, Barry, was it hard to walk away from the Times Free Press?
No, it was time. It was time for me. I had, and I mean this sincerely, I had the best job in Chattanooga for 37 years. I got to meet, and you'll see just a few of them. I got to meet some of the most famous people in the world, some of the coolest people in the world, people with some of the best stories, in the world. No 2 days were ever the same because of that. But it was starting to feel like that. It was starting to feel like I was doing the same thing over and over and over. And quite honestly, it doesn't pay well. It never did. But that wasn't what it was about until it was, if that makes sense.
So
You know.
what do you miss most about reporting?
Just the you never know what your day is going to be. A couple of the stories that I sent you, well, there's a couple of reasons. That Desmond Doss, you guys know who that is? Have you heard of the movie
That was the one, the movie, yeah.
Hacksaw Ridge?
That was one that I printed out for you guys if you want to take a look at it.
Have you heard of Hacksaw Ridge? Desmond Doss lived in Chattanooga for many years. He was a conscientious objector, meaning he volunteered to go to World War II, but did not want to carry a gun or a weapon. Wouldn't carry a gun or a weapon. And I mean, it's a true story. And he was, if you see the movie, he was ridiculed, beaten. They tried to run him off. They thought he was a coward. Called him a coward, called him everything you can imagine. And the man said, no, I'm here to do the job, I just won't carry religious reasons. He wouldn't carry a weapon. And he ended up, I don't even remember how many. They ended up in a gunfight on top of Hacksaw Ridge, and he literally by himself carried something like 22 people down to safety. The man was an absolute hero. He used to come to the paper. He was deaf as a post, and he would just come in, he would just sort of stand. And quite honestly, I was probably 20, 23, 24, 25, didn't know much about soldiers, and I just kind of thought he was an odd character. I wish I had spent more time talking to the man, because he was an absolute hero. So yeah, that's the reason for that column. The movie came out. Go ahead.
Oh, no, so since I'm not a journalist, they're not journalists, this is all, we're starting from scratch. We've kind of been working in reverse. We've been talking about headlines and leads.
Sure.
So your lead, there are many things to love about working at a newspaper, but at or near the top of the list has to be the diversity of people. How do you create a good lead?
Isn't that funny? That's just what I've been saying for 10 minutes. It's like I knew what I was talking about. How do you create? So I always get asked, how did you find your stories? How do you create a lead? There's a couple of ways. Sometimes when I would go do an interview, the car ride back to the paper or overnight, you hear the story in your head, right? Sometimes you can think of the 2 or 3 most important things. What is this story about? If I would get stuck, and this is what I would always tell our new writers, if you get stuck, if it's so complicated that you don't know where to start, you should always have, let me go back just a little bit. I always learned you should have somebody in your head who you're trying to reach with the story, whether it's a parent or a friend or your boss. Just if you can think of one person who you're trying to connect with, and then if you're really struggling, just tell them the story. You know what I mean? Even in your head, just say, what's important? Why do I care about this story? And once you start talking, it'll usually come out. It'll usually flow pretty quickly. And then for me, once I got the first, 3 paragraphs for sure, but once I got the first couple, the rest of it just takes care of itself. You fill in the details, right? The other thing that I always thought was important to share is answer the questions. There's always questions. Who was Desmond Doss? Why was he important? Why do I care? And if you can answer those questions, the story you're done, basically. By the time you've answered those questions, the story's written. Does that make sense?
Do you think like a good thing to maybe come up with a lead is to actually say it out loud to yourself or something like that?
Yep, yeah. Yeah, if you get stuck especially. Sometimes it's obvious. If something happens, the East Ridge Pioneers won 14-10. That's usually the lead. A football game happened, one team won, one team lost. Those are easy. If it gets really complicated or there's a lot going on, usually it's when there's a lot of detail that people get sort of stuck. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just a game. It's so many things happening. Like if you go to a city council meeting and they have 10 different topics, that's a lot to try to get into a story. So you got to figure out what the most important one is. So,
And when it comes to headline writing, did you write the headlines or did your editor write the headlines?
so in the past, the editors would write the headlines, and it was because of space, to be honest with you. You don't know, in that case, I had a column space that was all the way across the page, so I knew the width, right? But sometimes it might just be one column on a page, and only the editor, who is the one laying out the page, knows that. So typically, they would write the headline. Towards the end of their career, it was required of the writers to suggest a headline. And a lot of times it would end up being, the headline. They would try to make it fit. So can be both ways. Causes a lot of trouble because you might think the headline or the story has a different meaning than what an editor. And so there's a lot of cases where people will wake up the next day and say that headline doesn't match the story at all.
Yeah, and like what you mentioned earlier about, since he was a features writer, that was your main beat. Did they
Right.
ever switch up your beat on you and say you're going out to breaking news?
Yeah. Towards the end especially, I've done everything from sports to A1, which is the very front page. Sometimes that could merge, like it could be a Riverbend story, Riverbend's closing, shutting down, taking the year off. That's newsworthy enough to bump it to the front page. So because that was my beat, I would cover that. But I also did, I'm trying to think, one of the last ones I did was a school board meeting that they wanted me to cover. And it wasn't because I knew anything about school boards, it was because we were short of journalists and other people were busy. So I picked this one to share because it's one of the things I loved doing was because I did it for so long. I got to follow kind of the evolution of a person or a story. A guy named Jim Stryker, who owned a couple of bars in Chattanooga, became a pretty good source and a pretty good friend of mine. And then he got into the music promotion business and called me one day and said, hey, there's this kid named Kane Brown who's blowing up. He's doing all these social media videos, singing songs in his bedroom, recording them and posting them. And he's starting to get like 500,000 hits, and then 1 million hits. And then about the time I talked to him, I think he was up to about 1 million. And within a couple of weeks, just about every record label in Nashville was trying to sign him. And now he's one of the bigger country stars in the country.
I love your opening line here. We talked about using descriptive language. Voice sounds like charcoal-filled molasses. That's beautiful.
Thank you. I like that one too.
It's almost like you were writing.
It's almost like I knew what I was doing. Yeah.
You got paid for it, so.
Yeah. Kane, anybody know that story? You heard of Kane Brown? Not a lot of country fans. Yeah, well, I'm not a big country music fan either, but he's a super nice guy. he attended 5 different high schools in this area. Had a really rough family life. Lauren Elena, he became good friends. Anyway, it's a good story, and I'm happy for him. But he's one of those. That's Nick Lutzko on the right. Nick is another great story here in town. He was in a band when he was in high school at Red Bank. That went away to MTSU to study music, and then just kind of has been out on his own.
But I wanted to include these screenshots because as time went on, the paper had to adapt to the digital format. So Barry went from being just writing all the time to now he's stepping in front of the camera. So they had like a Music Wednesday series. He's out interviewing Nick Lutzko outside of the Hunter Museum.
Yeah.
He's with David Carroll on Channel 3. He's out with David Carroll on Channel 3 talking about Leslie Jordan passing away. So it became, as times progressed and the newspaper knew they had to catch up to the digital age, for some reason Barry was their guy to send him out.
Well, the reason is because I wanted to be quite honest with you. My degree from UTC, once I discovered that that was the path, was broadcast journalism. I thought I was going to be a TV reporter, and worked at Channel 12 while I was at UTC. But I figured out that if you were going to be any good and make any money in TV, you were going to have to move. Chattanooga was not a big enough market at the time to stay. And it's kind of ironic because shortly after that, no journalist ever left. They stayed for 20 and 30 years at the TV stations. But point being, my interest while I was getting paid to be a print journalist, I always liked TV and I always liked radio. And so when the internet started evolving, it was pretty clear to me that there was the divisions between the different types of journalism were blurring. There was no reason you had to just do print or TV or radio. And so I tried to push really hard with all the bosses at the paper that because of the internet, you could take a camera. Phone cameras weren't really a thing, but you could buy a fairly cheap digital camera and go out and get a story, and we would attach those, maybe a 30-second or 60-second clip, to our print stories. And then, like you said, 10 years ago or so, again, I wanted to showcase people like Nick and Kane and some Leslie Jordan and whoever else, and do interviews and attach them onto our website. It was kind of selfish because I enjoyed it, but I also figured it was good content. And then sort of that led to the podcasting with Brad, which when we started, we would record in the same studio where Alex and Brad
they
were.
would borrow the radio station.
Yeah.
I'm going to post this PowerPoint on Canvas so you guys can go check out the What Podcast. But in addition to it being a podcast, it's in video form. They post it on YouTube. They post it on Instagram clips. It's multi-platform, just like Barry was talking about with the paper, just like I talk about with my AV classes. You have to put it on everything. You can't just be in one medium.
Yeah, you really need, YouTubers where the numbers are. Even if it's just a static, graphic, and you're talking over it, that's where the numbers of people are.
I think you need to be on TikTok there. I think that's where you need to be.
Yeah, I may be aging out on some of this stuff, but it's, the big point there is you need to be multi-platform. Not too many people are doing just one thing anymore, even in journalism. Like the people that are still at the paper, the people that are at the TV stations have to be able to write. And in fact, if you want to go into television and you can write, you're like golden. That's who they're looking for, because a lot of the young talent can either look good on camera and they can't write, or they can write a little bit but they can't speak on camera. So it really helps if you can do a lot of different things.
Also, the ability to ad-lib.
Yeah, absolutely. Along those lines, that's another thing that I always would tell the young reporters. You've got to be able to listen, and then from that ad lib. The most important thing is to be able to listen. So many young journalists, and I get it, you're nervous, you're interviewing somebody famous, or you're interviewing somebody whose child just died, so you're nervous. There's all kinds of scenarios. So it's always a good idea to prepare ahead of time. Write down 4, 5, 10 questions and have them in your pocket, but don't get so fixated on those questions that you don't listen to the person speaking. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I would see is you'd ask a question and they would give you a great answer that you did not expect, but you're so focused on that next question that you move on. You know what I mean? It's hard to do. But I can't tell you how many times I've, listened to other podcasts or interviews, and, I can't think of a great example right off, but, say you're, I don't know, a Kane Brown says, having gone to 5 different schools was the best thing that ever happened to me, and then my next question is, what's your favorite country song? We missed a whole thing we could have spent the entire time talking about.
Well, it's a lot like if you're doing stand-up comedy and you've got your set list or whatever, and you're just so focused on getting to the next joke that you don't pause.
Right.
Silence can be deafening. I did stand-up once, so that's what it reminds me.
Silence is another great trick. Most human beings will fill in the silence. So as a reporter, and it took me a long time to learn this, ask a question, and then if Alex says yes, like if I would, what do you like about teaching? People. I mean, that's dull. That's not going to be my lead. But if I then just shut up, he's likely to want to fill in that quiet. And then you get more and more answers. And another part of that is at the end of the interview, allow for some time. Because once people relax, this thing right here and that intimidates so many people. As soon as you grab a microphone and point a camera at some people, they shut down, right? I don't know what it is. Yeah, I do. It makes you nervous. You feel like you're going to say something wrong. But if you relax and just have a conversation, you'll end up getting a lot of times things that you hadn't planned on.
Okay, so what do you not miss specifically about the TFP? I don't want to harp on the TFP because we don't have a lot of newspaper readers here.
Sure. Well,
I'm curious.
you just hit on it a lot, really. It's a medium that has not adapted. Let me put it that way. It's a dying medium, unfortunately. Printing a newspaper is very expensive. Staffing a large newsroom is very expensive. The readership is just not there enough to afford all of that. What I personally don't miss is, again, I had different thoughts on what we should be doing, and it's a lot of what I've just been talking about. The digital stuff, the video, the audio, the things that we should be writing about. I don't miss some of that, some of the old stuck in the mud ways of doing things.
And so you're looking at potentially the future of journalism. So how do you feel about the future of journalism?
I was going to say something smart, Alec, looks like a good nap.
No,
That's all right.
they're listening.
I know they are. I think we will figure it out. I think people in the industry will figure it out. I think journalism, to me, is one of the most important things that we have. There's a presidential election going on right now. It's journalists who ask the hard questions and put things out there in front of us so that we can make informed decisions, hopefully. It's not all about sound bites and, looking good or whatever. There has to be hard questions asked, and while I think newsprint is struggling, they have more space and time and typically people to ask the hard questions and to dive deep into. What I will add to that, what I love about podcasting and radio and the digital world is there really are no rules right now. There are basic journalism rules, the 5 W's. You have to answer the questions, who, what, when, where, why, all of those. Still should do those, but how you present it is wide open. I mean, we have so much fun with our podcast because we can do whatever. We wake up and we're like, who do you want to interview? What do you want to ask them? It can be the headlining musical act. It can be the guy who books the musical acts. It can be the guy who makes the pizzas that they sell and the vendors. We've interviewed all of those types of people. And they're all interesting. Once you sort of dive in, everybody has a story, and that's fun to me, finding a way to present it. One of the things we're going to start doing down at the library is podcasting. I don't know if you guys, do you do that as part of AV?
We are going to. This room was our podcast studio that I had to, it had a podcasting element that I had to blow up for the classroom. It's a long story.
I got you.
We are going to, it's my intention to start, get an RSS feed and get a podcast.
Well, the Whitfield County, which is where Dalton is, they started 4 or 5 years ago, student-led podcasts. And they actually are now part of a national network of high school students doing podcasting. It's really pretty cool. They have contests every year. It's everything like you would imagine. It's, your basketball team or your teacher who's doing something cool, or there's tons and tons of stories, and I think podcasting is a great way to present them because, again, whereas Alex, when he was with radio, you had a finite time. You had to fit whatever between commercials or between songs. You had 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes, 60 seconds. Podcasts, to me, everyone always asks, how long should a podcast be? And my answer is always as long as it needs to be. If it's 20 minutes, great. If it's 4 hours and it's interesting, I'll listen for 4 hours.
Would you say the same about a print article?
Yes. We used to have that fight. It's not too long. I won't get into it too deep, but they used to try to tell us, because readers would tell them, I don't want to read a long story. But they were basically putting 2 stories in front of readers and saying, which one do you like better? And of course they're going to pick the shorter one because it's shorter and they can get through it quicker. But again, if you're interested in that topic and it's well written, you'll read it. It's just the way it is. So yeah, kind of different. If you sat down and said, do you want to listen to a 4-hour podcast? Most people are probably going to say no. But if it's whatever topic you really love and it's well done, hopefully before you know it, you're 2 or 3 hours into it and it's still entertaining. So.
Well, taking you back to the days of the old prints, how difficult was it to work under a deadline?
I always liked it, honestly. I don't know if that's because I'm a procrastinator by nature, probably. I seem to do my best work when I have to get it done, and don't have time to think too much about it or, go chase something shiny and get distracted. I liked deadlines. It's the fun part, it's the pressure part, it's it didn't bother me.
So what about the pressure of, because there's not always gonna be a Kane Brown to find, there's not always gonna be, some weeks there's just gonna be, it's gonna be dry, slim pickings out there.
Sure.
So how did you handle that pressure when it was like, I've got nothing?
Yeah, as far as like news stories, there's always something. I didn't have any trouble with that. Writing a column every single week got pretty tough. I don't, some people can do it. If I had to write 52 columns a year, I'm not going to tell you 52 of them were great. I'm just, they just weren't. But what's interesting is the ones sometimes that I thought were like, not throwaways, but were just sort of a personal observation, usually ended up being the one that I got the most comments about because people could connect with it. It's funny, I was talking about, again, your former partner, Brad Steiner. We had this conversation. And Brad, you guys would do bits, basically, right? I mean, it was
Yeah, we made fart jokes.
made fart jokes, as Brad always would say. But he did one about buying a brand new Dyson vacuum cleaner. And to this day, he will tell you he gets more comments about that one particular radio bit than anything else he'd ever done. Because it connected with people, I just, that, to me, always stood out as kind of an example. You wouldn't wake up and think, this one's going to be a home run, but it was. So,
So what was the hardest part of your job?
wow. Huh.
You make it sound so easy, Barry.
Well, in a way,
Never had any trouble, folks.
well, no, the trouble that I had were like personnel driven type of getting along with a boss or another coworker, or quite honestly, especially in journalism, because it's not like you're punching a clock and doing an 8-hour job, that it's, at 8 in the morning what you're going to be doing, and at 5 o'clock in the afternoon what you're going to be doing, and you're going to have to do it all day. If you got your story done at 10 in the morning, you were kind of done. And that was a nice part, but it also meant you're sitting around doing nothing kind of for the rest of the day. That's a weird thing to complain about, but that was sort of the truth. Just push.
Yeah, push to the left, vent thing.
Yeah. There were days and weeks where you didn't have a story, and so you try to have to come up with something. I'm not going to lie. But typically there was so much going on in town. If you couldn't find a story to write about, it was your fault, sort of thing.
So do you write in your spare time? Did you write in your spare time as a kid? Did you take creative writing lessons?
Just in college. No, like I said, when I was a kid, we had to read books.
There were stone tablets. And you were carving in.
That's right. They were chiseled on the cave wall. No, you had to read. We had book lists and all that, and it was a chore. I didn't really learn to love to read and write until I was in college, and it became a choice. I do enjoy writing. I've had many people say, when are you going to write a book? And kind of, I would like to, but it's sort of like when it's your job. The last thing you want to do is go home and spend another 4 or 5 hours at a computer writing, for me anyway.
Well, you can do like Calvin Sneed, just take bridge pictures.
Exactly. He figured it out. I did want to say one of the stories that I don't know if I sent it to you because I was looking for it this morning at home. I mean, like I said, I've been fortunate to interview all kinds of celebrities, from Oprah to John Travolta to Usher to, on and on and on. And I enjoy those, but the one story that is probably my favorite was another World War II veteran.
Oh, I don't have that.
No, Tom Qualman. I couldn't find it this morning. But Mr. Qualman called me, and quite honestly, I didn't want to talk to him because I was afraid he was going to be an older gentleman. Sometimes they can be difficult. You don't know how lucid, how self-aware, how awake they are. But he and his airplane were shot down over Belgium in World War II, and they spent a week on the run, hiding out, and the people there were so happy to have American soldiers trying to liberate their country and fight this battle that they hid him out. And so he traveled at night, he and another guy from his plane. Everyone else was killed. But the two of them hid out during the day, and then they traveled at night, and each farm would help them, feed them, hide them out. Of course, if they'd been caught, they'd have killed the soldiers and the family. So it was a big, well, he survived, came home, and as the 50th anniversary approached, some of the people from Belgium reached out and said, "We've got a celebration. We'd love to invite you." He didn't want to go because, that was in the past. Most soldiers that I ever interviewed didn't like to talk about their experience. Anyway, they went. The lady, the very first night that they were shot down, he gave her his silk parachute, kind of, I don't know if it was in exchange for food, but he gave it to her. When he went back 50 years later, she showed him a shirt that she had made out of the parachute. They built a statue in the town center, and he said the grandkids could tell his story better than he could. They pointed out, you stayed in this barn overnight, you went here the next day, and it was just really emotional, quite honestly. And I didn't want to do that story, and it ended up being one of my favorites. So I don't know what the lesson there is other than quit being whiny and go do your job and be receptive, I guess, is the bigger thing. Like I said, everybody has a story, and I would not have heard that story had I not been open to it. So
they've just got 9 minutes before lunch, so I wanted to get some of the questions they had for you. This one's from Yari. So I'm going to rephrase it a little bit. What did you originally want to become when you were growing up? What was your original career goal? TV news, did you say?
Well, once I decided on journalism, yes, broadcast. When I was, like I said, younger and in high school and even started college, I had no idea. I guess if you'd asked me then, I would have said quarterback or baseball pitcher or some other thing that was never, ever going to happen. I knew that I liked music a lot, and so that sort of led me to the writing and the feature writing and all of that. And that's the other kind of thing I wanted to, I've told other classes, I'm not a singer, I can't play guitar, I can't play drums, but I know I loved music. And so what I learned was there are all kinds of different jobs and careers within bigger umbrellas. You know what I mean? Like you can be a music writer or music attorney or a promoter or a venue owner. Just because you're not good enough to be a singer doesn't mean you can't work in that industry. Same with sports. I wasn't going to be a quarterback, but I could have been a coach, or I could have been you want to be a nurse. I did a story when I first started. We asked kids what they wanted to be, little kids like 8, 9, and got their answers, and then we went and found people in the industry. And I'll never forget, one girl, of course, wanted to be a vet. So I called a vet, and he's like, yeah, everybody thinks about puppies and kittens and little bunny rabbits. They don't think about putting your arm up a horse's rear end because it's sick, one night. So there's the good and the bad. Medicine, most people, if you think I couldn't be a doctor because I don't like blood, well, not everybody in medicine deals with blood or sick or all kinds of, there's administration, there's all kinds of nursing. So I just want to make that point.
This one comes from Matthew. So who influenced you to do writing journal? Do you have influences?
Yeah, that fiction writing class, when I was at UTC, I had to take it, and the professor was a guy named Steve Richardson, who looked like Mick Jagger. I mean, he had the hair, he was crazy, and he was funny, and he told great stories, and he really encouraged the people in the class to be clever and don't just go to the library and copy an encyclopedia. Actually use your brain and try to be creative. And I think getting a good grade on that first paper was really a turning point for me. And then getting a good grade at the end of the year, I went back and took another class from him, and then took a communications class because I thought, this writing thing, I kind of like it. So that was a huge thing for me.
Ariel writes, do you have to be a certain age to write articles? Does the paper hire 18 or 19-year-olds?
Well, they would have in the past. Now they want college graduates. They want college graduates from a good journalism degree school. But the other thing, most high schools, you guys have a paper here?
We're going to start.
Yeah.
That's one of our projects.
A lot of high schools have papers. A lot of colleges have papers. But even if they don't, there's absolutely no reason why you can't keep a journal and just start writing. The more you write, the better you become. It's stunning to go back and read some of the early stuff that I've written. Some of it's not as bad as I would have thought. And some of it I'm like, ooh, I don't know who wrote that. But the more you do it, the better you get.
This comes from DeAndre. Do you think you like where you are in life currently?
Yes, I'm very lucky. I have absolutely no regrets that I no longer work doing that job. I was very lucky to have done what I did. When I sit and think about the opportunities and the people I've met, it's pretty incredible. To go back real quick, I think, again, Brad, and I don't know your story, how you got the job with radio, but it was so many people just keep showing up. And that's what I don't do. If you want to write, start writing, just for yourself even. But if you think you want to do radio or you think you want to do television, go down there and just be a pest. Volunteer to sweep floors. Volunteer to do whatever. There are so many people whose careers, whatever it is you want to do, just get your foot in the door. And the guys that run the Bonnaroo Music and Arts Festival started as fans. They just kept going, volunteered, and then now they are actually in charge. That doesn't always happen, but the fact that it can happen and did happen to me is pretty cool. So
I got my job in radio because UTC, for a communications degree, they make you do an internship. And so I worked for free at the radio station until I stayed there even after my internship ended and just showed up voluntarily. I didn't get paid. And then I finally got paid. I started in the summer as an intern, and they started paying me like $8 that November. So, but I just kept showing up.
Yep.
I just did whatever they needed. But any closing thoughts before they go to lunch? Because I'll let you go, and I'll let them
Yeah. I don't know whether I like to call it just think stupid or think out of the box or think crazy, but like with you guys, what you guys did with your radio show and what Brad and I did with our podcast, it's just if we can think of it, why not? You know, we've interviewed so many people on that thing. It's like, well, they'll never talk to us, whether it's a band or whatever. Make a phone call, and before you know it, it's surprising how many people say yes. We've had very few people say no. So that's my point. If you can think of an idea and somebody else says that's crazy, go for it.